Hey there, and welcome back to A Conspiracy of Gods, a custom 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons campaign written and produced by me, DeRay. I'm your DM. In this episode, we'll be going over some of the history of the world through which our players travel. This will include creation of the world, creation of the races, a little bit of information about the universe outside the world and the gods, as well as a very little bit of information about the formation of the three kingdoms. And with that, let's get right into it. In the beginning, there existed only planes. These planes were composed of magic and reality, energy, belief, and thought. Where they come from, no one knows. And how long they existed before the first beings appeared is anyone's guess. But in time, these planes that overlapped, intersected, and were interlinked in various and unexpected ways came to be possessed of intelligent beings. These beings, who would later become gods, to some, and for some of them, existed within specific planes or border regions within the universe. They went about their lives as they saw fit, and where they came from, not even they know. Even the oldest of them, like Loth and Mealisha, don't know. And where they go upon their destruction is unknown to them as well. Who or what created them, they have been attempting to discover for billions of years. But these beings came into existence, and they became attached to their planes and their border realms, as it were, and generally operated with friendly relations with each other. They may not have interacted often, but there was little trouble between the beings of the universe. And then one of the beings, a being who would become a god to the mortals and would become known as Mealisha, grew bored. You see, Mealisha existed in the border between the plane of life and the plane of knowledge. And in so doing, they grew weary of living within that border realm, not to the extent that they wished to move, but to the extent that they wished to see something different happen within the universe. For the universe had not changed since the creation of the beings that inhabited it. So, Mealisha set out, and they found the most barren and empty area of the universe, a very vacant area of the plane of time. And within it, Mealisha tore a hole, using knowledge they had gained from their home. A very small hole, nothing that would destabilize the universe, but an emptiness, a void waiting to be filled. And within it, Mealisha first took pieces of the elemental plane of fire and threw them within the void, mostly to see what would happen. And these pieces of the elemental plane of fire formed what Mealisha could only describe as balls, burning balls that orbited each other, shed light, warmth throughout this void. Mealisha then took pieces of the plane of essence, a plane of solidity and power, strength. Mealisha took these pieces and cast them into the now well-lit, warm void. And as they did so, they watched in fascination as these pieces of the plane of essence turned solid. They turned into balls of rock, as the mortals would come to know them, and they began orbiting the balls of fire that Mialicia had first added to the void. Fascinated and hoping to see what else would happen, Mialicia left and came back from the plane of elemental water, casting the pieces of elemental water into the void at the rocks, just to see what would happen. And in so doing, the water struck these rock balls, these pieces of the plane of essence, and stuck. Where Mialicia had expected them to bounce off and flee and perhaps even exit the void, they remained, instead forming great pools upon the surface of the balls of rock, covering the surface of the balls of rock in some areas and leaving it barren or cutting through it with long ribbons elsewhere. And Mialicia was fascinated. And so, Mialicia did the last thing they could think to do, as a bit of an experiment. They returned to their home and brought back with them a piece of the plane of life. And they took this piece of the plane of life and they cast it over these balls of rock and water, and watched and waited. And as they watched, and as they waited, life sprung up upon the surface of the planet, for that is what it would become known as. Life in the form of great trees, grasslands, animals of all kinds, large beasts of the sea, tiny flying creatures of the air. And it grew all across this land that Mialicia had created, and it thrived. And as it grew and expanded, it came into harmony with itself. The animals and the plants would work together in so many ways, and to say such, to maintain the balance of the world while ensuring that every creature could survive. But as Mialicia watched, they also saw an area devoid of life, an area of sand, sun, heat, and death, an area that no animal would attempt to pass through, and no plant could survive in. Next to the great mountains that had formed out of the piece of the plane of essence, this land grew. Next to the great sea that covered a part of this world, this area grew. This area of death, and intolerable as it was to life. And Mialicia grew sad, for they had watched life spread across this world, thrive, grow, balance, and yet here was this area devoid of life itself, devoid of balance. And so Mialicia returned to their home, and again brought with them a piece of the plane of life. But this they crafted carefully, minutely, and as well as their knowledge would allow them. And they crafted creatures that would survive within this waste, within this area intolerable to life. And they placed those creatures within, always with the goal of maintaining a balance with the world they had been placed in. And Mialicia left for 10,000 years or more, never returning to this hole in the universe, to this area of life and balance and beauty. Where Mialicia went, no one really knows. What they were doing, no one really knows, save for the beings of the universe. But over the next 10,000 or more years, other beings discovered this hole in the universe. 4 other beings. These beings grew fascinated as they watched, enamored with the balance and the beauty they saw within this ball of thriving life. And so they too acted as Mialicia had, gathering a piece of the plane of life and carefully crafting that life into creatures, which they would then place upon the world. And the being that would become known as Rasterik carefully crafted the small people for beneath the mountains, and in the darkness he placed them, with a hunger for knowledge and a love of craft to contemplate the knowledge that they had gained, to understand the mysteries of the world in which they lived. And to the being that would become known as Altasoth were created the Palanir, demi-giants with antelope horns upon their heads, and a sense of honor and respect for the world around them, for they were placed in the lush, deep valleys of the far west. They coexisted with a nature of unbridled strength, and they grew to honor and respect that, and to glory in the power of that nature. And they grew strong enough to rise out of their deep valleys. And as for the remaining 2, the twins, who would become known as Luliander and Beliak, they saw the fertile grasslands between the mountains and the seas, and they worked together, and Beliak providing his knowledge of determination, strength, and perseverance, and a desire for advancement, and Luliander providing her knowledge and expertise in all manner of change. Together, they crafted the race of humans and placed them upon the lands that they might thrive and grow, change the world to their liking. But after the twins had created humans, they again grew bored, and Luliander took her knowledge of change once more and took a piece of the plane of life and crafted a race based in change and strength and in effecting that change. And upon the slopes of the mountains and just off the sides of them, she placed the race of orcs. And Beliak, having a desire to see a race as gifted as he saw himself, he crafted the race of elves. And meanwhile, the race that Mialicia had placed within the great desert of the world had grown in strength and in number, and gnomes had risen in that land of death, and they thrived within building great cities and expanding as they could. And elsewhere, off the border of the land, gnomes that had left the desert grew and changed and became halflings, distant cousins of the gnomes of the desert. But they spread with the humans, for most human-like were their personality. And as these beings watched their creations grow and flourish, and some humans made pacts with the demons of the lesser planes, the planes of magic of man, that they still did not understand, for no race as yet had magic. Tieflings came to be. Through this method, these humans would explore the plains, unaware of the magic, with a lack of understanding of the magic within, and would come across these demons. And with these demons they would make pacts, and their bloodlines would become muddied with the blood of demons, and so came forth tieflings. And thus the creation of the world and the races came to be. From the boredom of Mulisha and their love of balance and beauty and life, sprung forth the world, gnomes, and halflings. From the great honor and respect and tenacity of Altasoth sprung forth the Palanir. From the contemplation of mystery sprung forth the dwarves from Rasterik. And from the love of change and ambition sprung forth the humans from Luliander and Beliak. From desire of chaos and change sprung forth the orcs from Luliander. And from the love of determination and skill sprung forth the elves from Beliak. And such was the state of the world. The created races grew, balanced with the world itself and the animals within. And unbeknownst to them, a war between the gods of existence raged. For there were beings of the universe that felt that the universe did not need the creations of Mulisha and the other gods. And they were bent on destroying it. And their numbers were great, too great for the creators to overcome. And in a last attempt to preserve their world, their creations, those that would become gods tore a rift in the universal planes, a hole deeper than that into which they had created, a hole to a place that the beings of existence did not understand and feared greatly. And they set this trap, and they waited. And as they fought those that would destroy their creations, they fell back. Beliak fell in the war, and other beings that did not participate in the war nor in the creation, watched. Some died, while others lived. Those that sought to destroy creation followed the creators and fell into the rift that had been torn. And the 4 remaining creators worked all of their strength, all of their energy, and all of their knowledge of their planes to seal this rift as permanently as they could, for fear that their enemy would return one day, and they would not be able to stop them. But, having survived the war and confident in the moment, with their ability to hold the rift fallen, for that is what they became known as, within the rift, they returned to the world. And the world they returned to was much changed, for the races had grown stronger and wiser, larger across the land. They had expanded, and now the land itself was full of them, full of humans, Palanir, orcs and elves and dwarves, gnomes and halflings and tieflings, and everywhere they traveled. And so, those that would be known as gods descended to the world and walked among their people and gained their names and were pleased with their creations, for the balance of the world remained. And so came these to be known as true gods, for they had walked among their creations and were known without doubt and without fear to be creators. to be gods among mortals. And while those that had not participated in the Rift War, as it came to be known among the beings of existence, watched, some of them, too, descended to the world, not to interfere with mortals, for they had no care of mortals, but there were things upon the earth that they found fascinating, things that matched up with their own planes of existence, with the lives they had known. And so came to be the plains gods, as the mortals would know them. Gods like Shal of storm and sea, gods like Loth of time and Nemoth of the fate of all things save mortals. So came Kaliumte, goddess of dragons. So came many others, many of whom the mortals don't even know exist to this day, for these plains gods care nothing for the affairs of mortals, for the most part. They are simply interested in their own domains within the world, though, on occasion, mortals have felt their wrath. And so, the world grew. The gods, the true gods and the plains gods alike, settled into their roles to this existence. But it came to pass that the essence of life that remained within the world grew malevolent. Through what means, no one is certain, though the true gods suspect interference from the Rift Fallen. But this malevolent energy grew to infect those that came near it, and those that came near it grew to hate the mortals around them, and they grew to use this malevolent energy against them. They first rose out of the great forest of the south, striking at humans and the other elves there alike, pushing them back, pushing them away, pushing them west to the first great human city. And in so doing, they fought with the Palanir and the dwarves as well, for the humans and the elves called to their companions, to the orcs, the dwarves, the Palanir, the gnomes, the halflings, anyone that would come and aid them. The tieflings fought alongside orcs, and the orcs fought alongside elves and dwarves, and together the mortal races attempted to combat those that were using the maligned energy of life. But where they fought with martial weapons, well made and strong from dwarven forges, they could not face the energy that was being used against them. And so the mortal races called out to their true gods, to the creators, and begged for help. And the true gods, who had left the world for a time, attempting to regain their strength after the war and after they had met with their races, returned to the world, and they saw with horror what was being done. And so they acted together for the last time. And Mielisha poured the energy of life and knowledge. Luliander added the strength of change. Rasterik, the understanding of mystery and contemplation. Altasoth, the rage of unkept nature and the strength to resist all. Together they added their knowledge and their wisdom and their strength, and cast upon the world in a shower of dust, really, this thing they had created. And as it spread and touched life, it changed life, giving whatever it touched strange powers and abilities. And for the mortals it touched, they gained the ability to manipulate energy itself in various ways. And each it touched, it affected differently. The Palanir became powerful and knowing in the ways of elemental magics, for that is what this was. While the dwarves gained a knowledge of the magic of shadow and light, and of mystery beneath the earth, as well as some ability to shape the earth itself, though that was not nearly as powerful as that of the Palanir. The elves gained the magic of nature itself, of life and of growing, while the dragons gained the magic of rage and power that came with it, while the gnomes gained the magics of knowledge, of seeing through things and seeing and entering the lesser planes, the mortal planes. And the tieflings, and the halflings, and the orcs all got magic, as was right for their races. And the humans gained magic different than all others, for they gained a magic that allowed them to do all, but not master any. They would become versatile magicians and mages, but would never have the raw strength of a Palanir elemental mage, or the understanding of a gnomish mage, despite their ability to cast all variety of magics. And with these new powers, the mortal races combated those that had been corrupted by this maligned life energy. They pushed them back and destroyed them to a man. And as the races returned to their homes, elves to the forest, Palanir to the western lands, humans to the grasslands and to the great city they had built, they began learning more about the magic they had been given, about the powers they had been given. And each race grew more acquainted with their magics, with their powers. And life continued. The humans built other cities, further north and east, while the Palanir built great archives in the deep valleys of the west, and the gnomes raised great citadels in the desert. The elves built treetop cities for themselves, and the dwarves great halls beneath the rock of the mountains. And in time, as things settled down, the humans, from the first great city in the south, rose in power and expanded across all the lands. To far south of the great forest, all the way to the edge of the Black Sea in the west, across the Sea of Diamonds in the east to the far continent, and north into the Dragonlands. And as they expanded and ruled, they made alliances with the races native to the land. Those races would accept the rule of the First Empire, and in so doing would be protected by the First Empire from any threat that came. In return, the First Empire would not destroy their homes, their cultures, or their lives. So arose the First Empire out of the southern grasslands from the first great human city. It expanded and grew in power and wealth across all the lands, collected knowledge of magic and of gods and of everything they could, and with the help of the dragons, the dwarves, and the elves, they constructed the great silver tower of Karoskan, a structure of the purest mithril, perhaps 400 feet tall with 5-foot thick walls. The dragons melted the mithril, you see, and the dwarves cast it, while the elves enchanted it. And so came the Silver Tower of the Thainish in the great city of Keroskan. And so came the power of the First Empire. And the First Empire rose many thousands of years after the war against the maligned energy. And it marked the first true recording of history for the world, with the exception of the dwarves and the Palanir. And presumably the gnomes, though few know what lies in their archives now. So rose the First Empire, ruler of all the lands, and it lasted for 1,000 years or more. But in time, that too fell, though why it fell is a matter of historical debate to this day. And the lands fell back to their natural order, save for the human lands, which had no natural order. And for 400 years, the humans fought amongst themselves without a unified governing body, while the other mortal races went about their business. The plains gods and the true gods went about theirs. But after 400 years, or perhaps longer, a second empire came to be, rising from the ashes of the first, rising from the first great human city in the south once more. And this spread across the land. But this time, the mortal races that were not human were far less willing to surrender. And so this second empire waged brutal war against the Palanir and the elves and the tieflings, while the gnomes and the dwarves were content within their own cities to trade and defend themselves, but otherwise not disturb the empire. And in time, the Second Empire found themselves unable to cross the great northern mountains to the Dragonlands in force, and unable to beat the Palanir back, though they hunted the elves and the tieflings with great vigor. And so came the Second Thainish Empire into the land. And it ruled, and it fought with the northern Karashek dwarves, who had allies among the elves and tieflings, and it fought with the Palanir of the west, eventually building a great wall, more than 60 feet tall and 10 feet thick, in an attempt to prevent the Palanir from crossing into their lands. And so too did the Second Empire kidnap dragons from the northern Dragonlands, for while they could not cross the mountains in force, they were able to kidnap young dragons. And as they grew, the great leaders of the Second Empire, great magisters and mages, all of them, learned the depths of the magics of the world, traveled through the lesser planes of mortals, and grew powerful in their ability to control the minds and wills of others. And so, the magisters of the Second Empire created the Dragonbound, first formed with the binding of a kidnapped dragon and an unwilling warrior. The Dragonbound would become the greatest, most terrifying fighting force the world had ever seen. And as the Dragonbound grew, they began taking older dragons from the Dragonlands as they could. And the greatest of the Dragonbound were bound with ancient dragons of whatever kind. And as the power of the Magisters rose, the strength of the Dragonbound rose as well. And so, the Second Empire was ruled. And after 600 years, records vary depending on the date of foundation, The empire was at its height. They had formed inquisitors to search the lands for rebellions, and the Dragonbound ruled the empire with an iron fist, while the Magisters gained greater arcane knowledge as they could. But something happened then. A Dragonbound rebelled, an unprecedented action. That Dragonbound, then captain, was Lord Captain Nallum. And Nallum fled the imperial capital in the first city, and he crossed the wall to the Palanir, for he knew that among the Palanir there was no love of the empire. And he convinced the Palanir that they could attack and win, that if they took the northern grasslands, they would take the breadbasket of the empire. They could travel east and south and attack the outposts and the strengths of the empire, taking all the wheat fields and the food production. And the Palanir agreed, and named Nallum, the former Dragonbound captain, Aurelian, a Palanir word for leader. And thus, Nallum Aurelian and his Palanir army crossed the wall, conquered the northern grasslands. Humans there, and all of the races there, joined him and his army, and they traveled east and conquered much of the northern empire, and south and conquered much of the empire there. Meanwhile, Nallum was constantly fighting with his former Dragonbound brethren, killing the rider and allowing the dragon to return to its home. And as they traveled, those elves that had survived the slaughter of the empire rose from the forest and joined the army, lending their bows and their magics to the cause, lending their warriors to bring down their oppressor. And so Nallum and his army marched, and they reached Kuroskan with the 60-foot granite walls and the massive silver tower, and the city surrendered. The people of the city did not wish slaughter, so they turned against the Magisters and locked them in their own tower, and opened the city to Nallum and his army. And so fell the Second Empire, not with a final epic battle, but with the rebellion of the first city of the humans. And the Palanir left to live behind the walls once more. And while they were not a fan of the wall, they took no actions to destroy it. The elves thrived among the trees again, though recovering from the slaughter of the Thanes is slow even now. And the other races returned to their homes, and the humans, being led by Nallum, founded the kingdom of Ilios, from the Tanars to the Sea of Diamonds. And the other humans, from the northern plains, founded the kingdom of Kantor, from the Tanars to the Karasheks to the Palan Wall. And both kingdoms held the third and final kingdom in check. They held Thaneland in check and under watch. And as the founding of the kingdoms progressed, a great migration of dragons was seen overhead, flying south toward the city of humans. And so became the Silver Tower black, for the dragons assaulted it with rage and with a vicious fire for the harm that the Magisters had inflicted upon their race. But eventually they returned. Even the great dragon goddess Kalomte could not bring down those mithril walls, only blacken them. And so the founding of the three kingdoms of the land came to be: Ilios, Cantor, and Thaneland. While the other races, the dwarves, the gnomes, Palanir, the elves, halflings, tieflings, and orcs, all existed within those kingdoms, save the Palanir, and all got on well. The racism of the Second Empire fell with the Second Empire, with the exception of the Thainish hating the Eleosians and the Cantorians, and vice versa, of course. And Nalam Aurelian and his great dragon ruled for a time, disappeared at the end of his reign, leaving his son to take the throne. Where Nalam and his dragon went, no one knows. What they are doing, no one knows. If they are still alive is up to speculation. But the son of Nalam and the children of the second Aurelian king, and so forth, have ruled Ilios for 800 years. Never has the Aurelian line been broken, not even by the Thainish invasion 70 years ago. For the Thanes had risen again in strength and power, and sought to redress the wounds that the Eleosians had caused them, and so invaded, and sent their most elite to kill the Aurelian line. But something happened during that invasion with their most elite soldiers, and one Aurelian survived and rose with a legion of soldiers that became known as the Legion of Thunder, for they would beat their shields as they marched to alert their enemy that death was upon them. And the Eleosian army held the Thainish soldiers at a standstill, and though their capital had fallen and their king was dead, the army resisted, allowing Anthos, the surviving Aurelian, to bring his soldiers and crush the invaders at last. And so for 6 months, the Eleosian capital was in Thainish hands. But by the end of the year, Ilios was free of Thainish invaders, and Anthos Aurelian had been crowned King of Ilios. And in that time, there have been great taxes, tariffs, and restrictions on the Thainish for their actions. And Ilios and Cantor have thrived, along with the other mortal races. And still, an Aurelian sits upon the throne. This, the grandson of Anthos, Malavich. And thus is a brief history of the three kingdoms and the world through which our players are traveling. If you enjoyed this and want more details, please feel free to check out a conspiracyofgods.weebly.com, where I've posted some documents detailing this history, providing a lot more information about the gods and about the empires and things of that nature. And if you're interested in more, feel free to let me know. I can always produce more of these history episodes. So, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the history of the world.